There's a pattern in how great military powers collapse. Not in big obvious ways, but through a quiet rot that spreads over decades. Think of Rome in 378, France in 1940, and the Soviet Union in Afghanistan in 1989. All three followed a nearly 6-stage arc of decline. And now, the United States is following the same path. Stage 1. The illusion of invincibility. Every empire starts at its strongest. Rome at its height, France between the world wars, the USSR in its heyday. All looked unbeatable. They had advanced armies, technology, strong recruitment, and global reach. This wasn't just an image, it was real strength. For the US, this peak came in the early 1990s. After the Gulf War, America showed it could effortlessly defeat a large conventional military. Its technology, logistics, and global deployments made it the most dominant force on Earth. But real power doesn't last forever. Stage 2 begins when that power starts to crack internally, and that's where complacency sets in. Stage 2. The rot behind the facade. There's no catastrophic loss yet. Instead, there's internal decay. Budget cuts disguised as efficiency, recruitment difficulties, lower training standards, procurement delays. Institutions begin to hollow out, but the reputation remains strong. That's exactly what the old empires experienced. By Rome's later centuries, it was recruiting more outsiders than loyal Roman citizens. Standards slipped, discipline weakened. Yet the legions were still called invincible, and leaders pretended everything was fine. The French military after World War I made similar mistakes. They built the Maginot Line and trusted static defenses. Their underlying doctrine didn't evolve. And in the Soviet Union, cracks appeared in morale, corruption, and outdated tactics long before Afghanistan exposed them. For the US, this phase began in the 2000s. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan stretched resources. Money went into operations, not modernization. New systems weren't produced fast enough. Readiness declined in plain sight, even as public speeches insisted on strength. And as decline deepens, the myth of power still holds, which leads to Stage 3. Stage 3. The illusion holds. Stage 3 is when the empire's name still commands respect, even though the foundation is shaky. The world still sees strength. Allies trust the guarantees. Enemies tread carefully. But internally, cracks multiply. That was Rome in its late period. The prestige of the legions still scared adversaries, but many troops were non-Romans whose loyalty was uncertain. The memory of Rome's legacy carried more weight than its actual power. France in the late 1930s looked powerful on paper, but its tank strategy, command structure, and defense doctrine were outdated. And the Soviet Union in the late 1970s looked terrifying. But beneath the surface, morale was brittle, logistical systems were failing, and the war machine was overextended. For America, Stage 3 arguably peaked around 2020. NATO allies still trusted US security promises. China and Russia weren't openly challenging every corner of US dominance yet. But recruitment was getting harder, standards were being eased, and many systems were aging faster than they could be replaced. A myth can only hold for so long. Then comes Stage 4. Stage 4. The reality check. Stage 4 marks the turning point, the moment when a major failure exposes the gap between reputation and reality. It's the moment everyone sees and says, maybe they're not as strong as we thought. For Rome, that moment came at the Battle of Adrianople in 378. The legions were ambushed and destroyed by the Goths. The defeat shattered the illusion of invincibility, accelerating Rome's collapse. Within decades, much of the empire was gone. For the Soviet Union, Afghanistan was the undoing. They held conventional superiority, but the Mujahideen fought asymmetrically. After 10 years of attrition, the Soviets withdrew in 1989, defeated not by a peer power, but by an insurgency. The myth was shattered. Within 2 years, the Soviet Union dissolved. For the United States, this moment came in August 2021, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. 2 decades of investment, training, and billions spent building the Afghan army ended in chaos. The government collapsed. Evacuations were carried out under fire, leaving behind massive amounts of advanced equipment. The illusion broke. In a real crisis, capability had eroded. Once that crack forms, the dominoes start falling. Stage 5, when everything falls apart. Stage 5 is where decline accelerates rapidly. After the major failure, confidence evaporates. Allies hedge. Enemies test boundaries. Every commitment is questioned. After France fell in 1940, its military prestige died. Allies doubted French strength. Influence shrank. After the USSR's defeat in Afghanistan, Eastern Europe didn't wait. The Warsaw Pact collapsed, and the Soviet system unraveled. In America's case, experts argue the warning lights are flashing red. Allies are already hedging. Gulf states are buying non-US weapons. Europe talks about strategic autonomy, a clear sign it no longer sees US strength as guaranteed. If multiple global flashpoints ignite, Taiwan, Ukraine, the Middle East, the US may struggle to respond everywhere. And when commitments unravel, Stage 6 begins. Stage 6, the end of projected power. Stage 6 is when an empire can no longer project power. Bases close, foreign commitments shrink, military reach narrows. The empire either collapses or becomes a regional power. Rome fell in 476. The empire fragmented. The once dominant Roman military couldn't defend Rome itself. France, after 1940, never regained superpower status. Even after World War II, its role was secondary. Its global weight never returned. The Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. Its global power projection vanished with the Warsaw Pact. If America continues on this trajectory, Stage 6 could mean a shrinking network of bases, reduced influence, alliances unraveling, and a military forced to operate close to home instead of globally. What's happening right now? Let's bring this back to the present and ask, what stage is America really in 2026? The US military is struggling to meet recruitment goals. Reports of lowered standards are growing. Some planes in active service are insanely old. Bombers from the 1950s are still flying, and ships are serving beyond their intended lifespan. Programs like the F-35 continue to face cost overruns and delays, slowing modernization. The Navy has fewer ships. The Army is smaller. Emerging threats, hypersonics, electronic warfare, challenge US advantages. These aren't isolated issues. They align closely with the historical warning signs seen in Rome, France, and the Soviet Union. Once a superpower hits this stage deeply enough, collapse becomes a real possibility. Trust erodes, guarantees weaken, enemies probe, and the empire shifts from dominant to defensive. History offers a harsh lesson. No empire has reversed decline at this stage without acknowledging the problem and making radical changes. If America wants a different outcome, it must confront the rot openly. Accept that reputation can no longer substitute for capability. Then rebuild. Not just with more money, but with real reform of priorities, readiness, procurement, and alliances. What do you think? Is there still time to restore the strength of the US military? Or have we already crossed the threshold where decline becomes irreversible? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We've included sources for several of the facts mentioned. Find them in the description.